Um, well, I think luckily it varies, and there's a much better understanding of it amongst everybody now versus before, where, it was poorly understood and just like completely stigmatized. Um, I will say you have, you know, parents on a continuum, right? Parents and students on a continuum, right? Where it still is poorly understood and there's kind of a denial piece to it, right? To, very supportive and very involved and, having older brothers who will, look out for them and try to find the right education and language and everything to use with them so that they feel connected and loved and, everything else. I think for Asian families, there's the additional layer of stigma, right? So I'm sure you all remember, like, growing up, right? If, another parent was like, oh, your kids are so good, then it's like a huge compliment, right? Like, if your behavior is good, right? It's like a huge compliment, right? And then your parents are, like, so proud of themselves, right? And so for kids who are on the spectrum, they're like bad, right? They're not really bad, but they're like perceived as bad, right? Like, how can this kid be throwing this huge tantrum when, especially if they're kids who are lower on the spectrum, right? There's some kids who are higher on the spectrum as well, right? And they're fully functioning. They might be a little bit awkward, but for the most part, they're fully functioning as schools. I'm talking about like kids on the lower end of the spectrum where they clearly need more support. But like, so that layer of additional like judgment and stigma makes it much harder for the family to accept and kind of support and move on from, which is really unfortunate because they tend to have better prognoses, like get better, if they have much more support, like wraparound support. So in a sense, like I think in some of these families, like if they're so much in denial about it, it actually ends up being hurtful, and this kind of thing actually ends up taking longer because they're not seeking the services for their child that could be helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't call out anyone, but and about like Asian families, I know there's so many in the country, and there's not eight like families or the moms and dads who are Asian. They're not stereotypically always going to be not like have this layer of judgment towards I guess neurodivergent like kids like my brother, but I definitely think there is like a huge judgment barrier, right? I mean, you have your mom and the dad, and you'll have like the relatives saying, like they like just imagine saying that you're like I'm like if I'm a dad and I have a son who's really good at everything, perfect grades, plays three instruments, plays like three sports as well, and these other and hey, and the relatives come over to me and say, hey man, yeah, congrats on your like your son, hey, congrats on your award and all of that, and I'm gonna be very proud, as a father figure, right? But I guess that sense of accomplishment as a parent may not have been so like significant. Say if you have like a neurodivergent person like my brother, but one of the things my dad has always told me about my brother is progress not perfection, and that's just a motto that we all hear all the time. It's basic, it's on it's very basic. And about my brother, right, we always emphasize the process of him getting to where he wants to be, getting what he wants, good accommodations, but it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. And every time he makes a little small step, maybe in another person's eye it's not as big as a step as we hope it to be, but if he takes any sort of accomplishment or any, no matter like how big or small, like we're always going to celebrate that. And so I wish that there was that layer of judgment would just be like broken down and all that, but
Yeah.
it is what it is, and that stigma, it's still there, but I definitely think we should probably bring some more exposure to that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I don't think people realize small steps are actually huge for kids who are especially on the lower end of the spectrum. So for working with somebody, if 4 months later they're giving you good eye contact, that is like excellent progress, right? 4 months later, that is like fantastic progress. And I'm not saying that just to be positive. I'm saying that because of the nature of being on the lower end of the spectrum, right? And I don't think people recognize how hard it is to progress with this. And so once there's a better recognition of that, I think people can appreciate those steps more.